The first thing I found was my own boot print, standing in the middle of the trail. The problem was, I was still wearing both boots. I noticed it at 2:17 in the morning, about 6 miles beyond the last marked section of the Appalachian Trail, while investigating a radio transmission that had come from a ranger station that had been abandoned for almost 11 years. At first, I thought it was a trick of the flashlight. The print was perfectly clear in the wet mud, facing me. The same tread pattern, same worn-out heel on the right side. Even the small crescent-shaped crack across the sole matched the boots I had been wearing for nearly 3 years. I crouched down and touched it. Fresh. Water was still slowly filling the grooves. I looked behind me. Nothing. No second set of footprints. No animal tracks. Just wet leaves. Black trees. And the narrow trail disappearing into the fog. I stood up slowly and heard something breathing somewhere beyond the trees. Not an animal. It sounded almost human. 3 slow breaths. Then silence. I radioed my partner, Cole, who was waiting near the old service road, and told him I had found something strange. He answered immediately. "Come back." His voice sounded wrong. Flat. Frightened. I asked what happened. There was a long pause. Then he said, "Because you're not 6 miles out." I laughed because I thought he was messing with me. He wasn't. According to Cole, I had been standing less than half a mile from him for the last 40 minutes. He could see my flashlight moving through the trees. He could hear me walking. But every time he called my name, I never answered. I looked at my watch. 2:19. I looked down at the GPS unit attached to my vest. The screen showed my location as 7 miles deeper into the wilderness. Then the coordinates changed. They began moving, slowly. Not my location moving across the map. Something else was moving toward me. The little marker appeared about 300 yards behind my position and began closing the distance. I turned around. Nothing. Just fog. I called Cole again. "I'm coming back." This time he didn't answer. Instead, my radio crackled and a voice whispered through the static. "Don't come back." I froze. It was Cole's voice. But Cole was still alive and standing somewhere behind me. I knew, because a second later, I heard him shouting my name from the darkness ahead. "Mason!" I raised my flashlight. "Cole! Don't move!" he yelled. "Whatever you do, don't move!" I couldn't see him. I could hear his boots somewhere beyond the fog, but they weren't getting closer. Then he said something that made every hair on my arm stand up. "Mason, there's somebody standing behind you." I didn't turn around. I couldn't. My flashlight trembled in my hand. "How far?" I whispered. Cole didn't answer. "How far behind me?" Nothing. Then I heard footsteps. 1, 2, 3. Slow steps on wet leaves. They stopped directly behind me. Close enough that I could hear someone breathing. I could smell something too. Wet earth. Rotting leaves. And underneath it, the sharp, metallic smell of blood. I kept staring straight ahead. Cole whispered from somewhere in the fog. "Mason, don't look at it." Something moved behind my left shoulder. I felt the air shift against my neck. Then a voice whispered directly beside my ear. "You already did." I spun around. There was nobody there. My flashlight swept across the trees, the trail, the fog. Empty. But 30 feet away stood an old wooden sign half buried beneath vines. I had never seen it before. The letters were faded, but I could still read them. Ranger access. No public entry. Beneath that, someone had scratched another message into the wood, not carved neatly. Scratched violently, as if with a knife. "Don't follow the voices." I backed away from the sign. My radio suddenly came alive. Cole was screaming. Not calling my name, not asking for help, just screaming. Then the transmission cut off. I started running. I didn't care about the trail anymore. I didn't care about the GPS. I just ran toward the sound of his voice. Branches slapped my face. Fog poured between the trees. I crossed a small creek and nearly fell. Then I saw his flashlight lying on the ground. The beam pointed toward a wall of trees. Cole's rifle was beside it. His radio was still transmitting. I picked it up. "Cole!" Nothing. I shouted his name. A voice answered from deep in the woods. "Mason!" I nearly dropped the radio. It was Cole. I started toward the voice, then stopped. Something was wrong. The voice was coming from behind me. I slowly turned. Cole was standing on the trail where I had just been. At least, something wearing Cole's uniform was standing there. His head was tilted slightly to one side. His face was hidden by the darkness. I raised my flashlight. The beam hit his chest. His ranger jacket was soaked in mud. His arms hung completely still. Then he lifted his head. His face looked normal. Too normal. He smiled. Cole had never smiled like that in his life. "You found the old station," he said. I whispered, "What happened to you?" He didn't answer. Instead, he pointed behind me. "It's waiting for you there." I turned my head just enough to look. Through the trees, barely visible in the fog, was a small cabin. The abandoned ranger station. The one that supposedly hadn't been standing for 11 years. Its windows were glowing from inside. Warm yellow light spilled across the forest floor. And behind one of the windows stood a person watching me. I couldn't see the face, but I could see the uniform. It was mine. The figure raised one hand and slowly waved. Then my radio whispered one final sentence. Not from Cole. Not from anyone I recognized. "Ranger Mason. You've been missing since 1998. I didn't understand the transmission. I couldn't. My mind kept rejecting the words because I was standing there in my uniform, holding my own radio, staring at a ranger station that, according to every record I had ever seen, had been abandoned in 2015. Cole was still standing 30 feet away, smiling at me. "What did you hear?" he asked. I didn't answer. I looked at his boots. They were covered in the same black mud I had seen around the mysterious footprint. "Cole," I said quietly. "What year is it?" His smile disappeared. For several seconds, he simply stared at me. Then he whispered, "Don't ask that." Behind him, the cabin window went dark. I heard something move inside. A heavy scrape across the wooden floor. Then another. Cole suddenly grabbed my arm. His fingers were freezing cold. "We need to leave before it realizes you're awake." "What is it?" I asked. He looked toward the cabin. "The reason nobody patrols this section anymore." We started walking away from the station, but after about 50 yards, I noticed something wrong. The trees looked familiar. A broken pine branch. A large grey rock. A dead tree split down the middle. I had passed those exact things earlier. We were walking in a circle. Cole noticed it too. He stopped. We're back at the station. I looked behind us. The cabin was gone. No lights, no building, just trees. Then we heard a door slam somewhere ahead. We both raised our flashlights. The abandoned station was suddenly standing directly in front of us. The front door was open. A faint yellow light flickered inside. Cole whispered, "Whatever happens, don't answer if it calls your name." We stepped inside. The air smelled old and damp, like a building that had been buried underground. There were photographs hanging along the walls. Ranger photographs. Dozens of them. Some were black and white. Some looked decades old. Others looked much newer. I moved my flashlight across them and stopped. One photograph showed a group of rangers standing outside the station. I recognized the building. I recognized the uniforms. But one man standing in the back looked exactly like me. Same face. Same scar above my eyebrow. Same eyes. Under the photograph was a date. October 14th, 1998. I stepped closer. "That's impossible," Cole whispered. "It isn't." I turned toward him. "What happened in 1998? He looked terrified. 4 rangers disappeared during a night search. 3 bodies were found. The 4th was never recovered. Who was the 4th? Cole didn't answer. I looked back at the photograph. The man's name was written beneath him. Mason Hale. My name. My exact name. Suddenly, something knocked 3 times on the wall behind us. Knock. 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 Cole grabbed my shoulder. "Don't respond." Another 3 knocks came from the opposite wall. Knock. 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 Then the ceiling. Knock. 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 Then the floor beneath our feet. Knock. 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 The entire cabin went silent. Cole slowly looked at me. "It's trying to find out where we are." I whispered. "It already knows." The radio on my vest crackled. A voice came through. My voice. "Cole, don't trust him." Cole's eyes widened. The radio continued. "I'm still outside." We both looked toward the doorway. Someone was standing there. It was me. Same face, same uniform, same boots. He looked terrified. He pointed at Cole and shouted, "That's not Cole!" Cole immediately raised his rifle. "Don't listen to it!" the other me screamed. "He's been dead for 3 days." Cole fired. The figure disappeared before the shot reached him. There was no body, no blood, nothing. Cole lowered the rifle and started breathing heavily. "Mason, listen to me." I stepped backward. "What are you?" He didn't answer. Then I noticed his reflection in the window. I could see myself standing beside him. But Cole wasn't reflected at all. Something cold touched the back of my neck. I turned. Nobody. Then the station lights went out. In complete darkness, Cole whispered, "Run." I ran through the back door and into the forest. I didn't look behind me. I heard footsteps chasing me. Fast. Much faster than any human could run. I crossed the creek, climbed the ridge, and finally saw the emergency road ahead. A truck was parked there with its headlights on. 2 rangers were standing beside it. I screamed for help. They waved me over. One of them shouted, "Mason, hurry!" I stopped dead. I had never met those men. One looked at his partner and smiled. "He remembers us." I turned around. The forest behind me was completely silent. No footsteps. No Cole. Nothing. I got into the truck anyway. The driver looked at me through the rearview mirror. "You shouldn't have come back," he said. "Back from where?" I asked. He looked at the passenger beside him. Both men slowly turned toward me. Their faces were pale and strangely familiar. The passenger reached into his jacket and pulled out an old photograph. He placed it on the dashboard. It was the same Ranger group photo from 1998. 4 men stood outside the station. 3 of them were the men sitting in the truck with me. The 4th was Mason Hale. Me. I stared at the photograph. Then I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Behind the 4 rangers, inside the station window, stood a 5th figure. It was watching them. The driver whispered, "That's what took you." I looked at him. "When?" He shook his head. "Tonight." My stomach dropped. "What year is it?" Neither man answered. The truck began moving. I looked through the rear window. The forest disappeared into darkness. Then I saw the ranger station far behind us. Its windows were glowing again. A figure stood in one window. my figure. It raised its hand and waved. My radio crackled from the seat beside me. I slowly reached for it. A voice whispered through the static. "Mason, if you're hearing this, don't get out of the truck." I looked at the driver. He was staring straight ahead. Then the radio whispered again. "Because the men driving you home aren't rangers." The driver slowly smiled at me through the mirror. And from the back seat, something whispered directly beside my ear. They never were. Story 2. At 4:06 in the morning, I found a human hand hanging from a tree 70 feet above the Appalachian Trail. It was pale, motionless, and completely exposed beneath the beam of my flashlight. I remember thinking it couldn't be real, because there was no way anyone could have climbed that tree without leaving footprints in the snow. Then the hand moved. Just one finger, slowly curling inward. I immediately called it in, but before dispatch could answer, another hand appeared from the darkness above it. Then another. 3 hands were gripping the same branch, all pointing downward toward me. I backed away so quickly that I fell into the snow. My radio slipped from my vest, and when I grabbed it, I heard a woman's voice whispering through the static, "Please don't let them see you." I recognized the voice. It belonged to a hiker who had been missing for 11 days. Her name was Emily Carter. Her backpack had been found 3 miles north of where I was standing, but no trace of her body had ever been discovered. "Emily," I whispered. The radio went silent. Then she answered, much closer this time. "I'm underneath you." I looked down. My boots were standing on something soft beneath the snow. I slowly moved my foot away. The snow collapsed, revealing a black nylon backpack buried directly beneath the trail. Emily's backpack, the same one from the missing person report. The zipper was frozen shut. I pulled it open. Inside were her clothes, a camera, a water bottle, and a ranger-issued emergency beacon. The beacon was still blinking. That made no sense. It had been recovered 11 days earlier. I picked up the camera and turned it on. The battery showed 83%. The last photograph had been taken at 3:58 that morning, not 11 days ago. 7 minutes earlier. The image showed me standing exactly where I was standing now. I stared at the screen. The photograph had been taken from somewhere behind me. I slowly turned around. Nothing. Just snow-covered trees and thick Appalachian fog. Then I noticed footprints. They began at the edge of the woods and came straight toward me. They stopped directly behind my boots. There were no footprints leading away. My radio crackled again. Emily whispered, "You need to leave before sunrise." I asked her where she was. She said, "I'm still on the mountain." "Where?" I demanded. "Inside the trees." I looked up. The hands were gone. The branch was empty. But the snow beneath the tree was covered in fresh blood. I radioed dispatch again. This time, someone answered. "Ranger station, go ahead." I told them about the backpack and the voice. The dispatcher became silent. Then he asked me a strange question. "What trail marker are you near?" I looked around. "Marker 47. Another pause. "That's impossible." "Why?" "Marker 47 was removed 12 years ago." My stomach tightened. I turned toward the trail. There was an old wooden marker standing between 2 trees. The number 47 had been carved into it. Underneath was another message. "Don't look up." I looked up anyway. There was a man hanging from the branches. His body was wrapped in an old ranger uniform. His face was turned away from me. I raised my flashlight. The uniform had my name stitched across the chest. Mason Hale. I stepped backward. The body slowly turned its head. I saw my own face staring down at me, and it smiled. My radio screamed with static. Emily's voice came through one final time. Now you understand why I never came back. The thing in the tree opened its mouth, and from somewhere deep inside the forest, dozens of voices whispered my name at exactly the same time. I ran. I didn't care where the trail went or whether I was heading deeper into the mountains. I only knew I couldn't stay beneath that tree. Behind me, something hit the ground with a wet, heavy sound. I didn't turn around. I heard branches snapping as whatever had been hanging above me followed. My radio kept screaming with static, and beneath the static, I could hear Emily whispering over and over, "Don't stop." I reached marker 48 and suddenly realized something was wrong. There was no trail beyond it. The path simply ended at a wall of trees. I checked my GPS. The screen showed I was still moving forward, but the map displayed nothing except a blank grey area. Then my compass needle began spinning. I turned around. Marker 47 was gone. So was the trail behind me. I was standing in a forest that seemed to have no way out. Then I heard footsteps. Slow, careful, walking directly toward me. I raised my flashlight. Nothing. The footsteps stopped. A woman's voice whispered from somewhere between the trees. "Mason?" I froze. It was Emily. "Where are you?" I shouted. "Behind you." I turned. Nobody. "Don't turn around again," she whispered. "It's learning your voice." I stood perfectly still. "What is it?" I asked. Emily answered, "It doesn't have a face until someone gives it one." My radio suddenly crackled. A man's voice came through. "Mason, this is dispatch. We have visual on you." Relief hit me instantly. "Where?" I asked. 200 yards south. Stay where you are." I looked at my GPS. The signal had suddenly returned. A red marker showed 200 yards south. I started walking toward it. Emily began screaming through the radio. "No! That isn't dispatch." I stopped. The voice returned. "Mason, keep walking." It sounded exactly like my supervisor. Then Emily whispered, "Ask him what happened to me." I raised the radio. "What happened to Emily Carter?" Silence. Then the voice answered, "She was never found." Emily laughed softly. That's not what happened. The forest went completely silent. I heard breathing directly behind me. I refused to turn around. Then something placed a hand on my shoulder. It was freezing. I closed my eyes. Emily whispered, "Now run." I threw myself forward. The hand disappeared. I ran blindly through the trees until I saw a faint light ahead. A ranger truck. 2 headlights. I nearly collapsed with relief. Someone jumped out and shouted my name. "Mason!" I ran toward him. It was Cole, another ranger from my station. He grabbed my shoulders. "Where have you been?" I tried to explain everything at once. The tree, the backpack, Emily, the voice, the thing following me. Cole just stared at me. Then he said, "Mason, you've been missing for 11 days. I stopped breathing. "No." He shook his head. "We found your truck 11 days ago. We found your radio. We found your footprints leading into the woods." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph. It showed me standing beside the trailhead. The date was 11 days earlier. "That's impossible," I whispered. Cole looked terrified. "We thought you were dead." Then my radio came alive. Emily's voice whispered, "He's not Cole." I stared at the man in front of me. Cole slowly smiled. "Don't listen to her." I looked down at his boots. They were covered in fresh snow, but we were standing on bare ground. I stepped backward. "Where's the real Cole?" I asked. The thing wearing his face tilted its head. "You already know." Behind it, the forest began filling with figures. Rangers, hikers, search volunteers. dozens of them standing between the trees. Every single one had the same pale face. Every single one was staring at me. Then Emily's voice whispered from the radio, "Mason, look at the tree." I turned. The tree beside the truck was covered with photographs. Hundreds of them. Missing hikers, rangers, search teams, people who had disappeared on the mountain over decades. At the very bottom was a new photograph. It showed me standing beside the truck. But I wasn't alone. Something was standing behind me. I slowly looked over my shoulder. Nothing. Then I looked at the photograph again. The thing behind me had moved closer. I looked back. Nothing. Back at the photograph. Closer. Again. Closer. Its face was almost touching mine. I dropped the picture. The thing wearing Cole's face leaned toward me and whispered, "It only moves when you look away." I closed my eyes. I didn't look anywhere. I didn't breathe. Then I felt something standing directly in front of me. A voice whispered, "Open your eyes." I refused. "Open them!" I refused again. Then Emily screamed through the radio, "Mason, that's not the creature!" I opened my eyes. Emily was standing in front of me, pale, exhausted, covered in mud. Tears were running down her face. She grabbed my arm. "We have to go." I looked at the thing wearing Cole's face. It was gone. The forest was empty. "Where?" I asked. Emily pointed toward the mountain. "Down." We ran. After what felt like an hour, we finally reached the ranger station. I burst through the doors and collapsed. The other rangers surrounded me. They kept asking where I'd been. I looked at Emily. She was standing beside me, alive. I told them everything. Nobody believed me. Then the station radio crackled. A dispatcher said, "We've just received a report of 2 missing hikers near marker 47. I looked at Emily. Her face went completely white. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Why?" I asked. She slowly pointed at the radio. "Because those hikers are us." I turned toward the window. Outside, 2 figures were standing in the snow. One was me. The other was Emily. Both were staring through the glass. Then the radio whispered in my own voice, "Don't let them inside." The lights went out. Something knocked 3 times on the station door. Knock, knock, knock. Emily grabbed my hand. "Whatever happens," she whispered, "don't answer." Then the knocking stopped. A few seconds passed. And from the other side of the door, I heard my own voice say, "Emily, it's safe now." She began crying, because she recognized the voice. It was mine. And I was standing beside her. Story 3. The ranger tower was supposed to be empty. I knew that because I had personally locked it 3 days earlier. So when I saw someone standing behind the glass at the top of the tower at 1:13 in the morning, waving a flashlight at me, my first thought was that someone had broken in. My second thought was much worse. The person was wearing my uniform. I was alone that night, 7 miles from the nearest paved road, checking an old fire lookout that had been closed since a lightning strike killed a ranger there in 2009. The tower stood above the trees like a skeleton, its windows glowing faintly through the fog. I raised my binoculars. The figure disappeared. I radioed dispatch. "Possible trespasser at Lookout 12. Static answered. Then a man's voice whispered, "Don't go upstairs." I recognized the voice immediately. It belonged to Ranger Daniel Price, the man who had died in that tower 17 years earlier. I lowered the radio. "Repeat." The voice came back. "You heard me." I should have left. Every training instinct I had told me to get back to the truck and call for backup. Instead, I walked toward the tower. The door was locked. The padlock was still hanging exactly where I had placed it 3 days earlier. but the lock was warm. I touched the metal and immediately pulled my hand away. It felt like someone had been holding it. I cut the lock and entered. The staircase smelled of smoke. Not old smoke. Fresh smoke. Halfway up, I found muddy footprints on the steps. Bare feet. Human feet. They started above me and continued downward. There were no prints below the first landing. I followed them upward. At the top, the observation room was empty. The windows were fogged from the inside. On the desk sat an old ranger logbook. I recognized it from the station archives. It had been recovered after Daniel Price's death and sealed away because several pages were considered disturbing. I opened it. The final entry was dated August 19th, 2009. 1:10 a.m. Someone is walking around the tower. The next line had been scratched out. Beneath it, in different handwriting, were 5 words. It sounds exactly like me. I turned the page. Another entry appeared. 1:13 a.m. I can see myself outside. I stopped reading. My watch showed 1:12. Something knocked on the glass behind me. I slowly turned. Nothing. I looked at the window. My own reflection stared back. Then the reflection smiled. I didn't. I stepped away from the glass. The reflection remained still for 2 seconds before slowly raising one finger to its lips. I grabbed my radio. Dispatch, I need immediate assistance at Lookout 12. Static. Then my own voice answered. Dispatch, I need immediate assistance at Lookout 12. I froze. The transmission repeated my exact words in my exact voice. Then another transmission came through. Ranger Mason, leave the tower immediately. I recognized that voice too, my supervisor. Who is this? I asked. I'm outside. I looked through the window. There was nobody around the tower. The fog was too thick to see the ground clearly. Outside where? I asked. Under the tower. I leaned toward the glass. Something was standing beneath the structure. A person, completely motionless. I zoomed in with my flashlight. It was wearing a ranger uniform. Mine. The figure looked up. I couldn't see its face. Then it raised both hands and slowly began climbing the tower supports. I backed away from the window. The radio whispered, "Don't let it reach the top." I grabbed my flashlight and ran toward the stairs. Then I heard footsteps above me. Someone was already climbing down. Slow footsteps. One step at a time. I aimed my flashlight upward. A pair of boots appeared on the staircase. Then another step. The figure was wearing my uniform. I shouted, "Stop!" It stopped. "Identify yourself." Silence. Then my own voice answered from the darkness above me. "I'm the ranger who went missing." I backed down 2 steps. "What's your name?" The figure began walking again. "Mason Hale." My stomach dropped. That was my name. The figure reached the landing. I raised my flashlight toward its face. It looked exactly like me. Same eyes. Same scar. Same tired expression. But there was one difference. Its mouth was sewn shut with black thread. It pointed toward the window. I turned. The figure outside had reached the top platform. It was standing directly behind the glass now. 2 identical versions of me were staring at me. One inside the tower, one outside. Then the radio crackled. Daniel Price's voice whispered, "Mason, you're not supposed to be the 3rd one." I looked down at my hands. For the first time, I noticed black dirt underneath my fingernails, and I suddenly remembered something I couldn't explain. I had not arrived at the tower that night. I had woken up there. 17 years earlier. For several seconds, I couldn't move. 17 years earlier. The words repeated inside my head, while the two figures wearing my face stared at me from opposite sides of the observation room. I looked down at my hands again. The dirt beneath my fingernails was real. The blood on my sleeve was real. Everything felt real. But somewhere deep inside, a memory was beginning to surface. A memory I had spent years believing was a nightmare. I remembered being 17 years old, standing outside this same tower during a storm. I remembered a ranger named Daniel Price grabbing my shoulder and screaming, "Whatever you hear, don't answer it." Then everything went black. The figure beside me slowly pointed toward the logbook. I looked down. A new sentence was appearing across the paper. The ink moved by itself, forming letters one at a time. "He remembers!" The radio crackled. Daniel's voice returned. "Mason, listen carefully. The thing outside isn't the danger." I looked toward the window. The figure outside was gone. I turned back to the staircase. The other version of me was gone too. I was alone. "Then what is?" I whispered. Daniel answered immediately. "You!" The tower lights flickered. I heard footsteps beneath the floor. Slow. Heavy. Something was climbing the internal staircase from below. I grabbed my flashlight and backed toward the window. The footsteps stopped. Then came 3 knocks beneath the floorboards. Knock, knock, knock. I remembered the old ranger reports. Every missing person connected to Lookout 12 had reported hearing 3 knocks before disappearing. I whispered, "Daniel, what happened here in 2009? He answered, "We found you." My breathing stopped. "What? You were 17. You were standing outside the tower during the storm. You kept telling us someone inside was calling your name." I stared at the logbook. "I don't remember." "That's because we made you forget." A cold wind passed through the room, even though every window was closed. "Who made me forget?" I asked. Daniel's voice became barely audible. "I did." Something slammed against the tower wall. The entire structure shook. I looked through the window. The fog had disappeared. Below me was the forest. But the trees were different. There were no roads, no ranger truck, no modern equipment. And beneath the tower stood a group of people wearing old ranger uniforms. Dozens of them. Every face was turned upward. Every person was looking at me. One stepped forward. Daniel Price. He looked exactly like the photographs from the station archives. Alive. He raised his hand and pointed toward the tower door. I heard a key turning in the lock. I backed away. The door slowly opened. Daniel walked inside. He looked at me with exhausted eyes. "You shouldn't have come back," I whispered. "I didn't come back." He shook his head. "Yes, you did." He pointed toward the desk. The logbook was open to the final page. There was a photograph lying on it. I picked it up. It showed Daniel and several rangers standing outside the tower in 2009. In the middle stood a teenage version of me. I stared at the photograph. Then I noticed something behind us. A tall figure was standing between the trees. It had no face. Daniel looked at the photograph and whispered, "That's what we were trying to keep away from you." I turned toward him. "Why me?" He looked genuinely afraid. "Because it couldn't imitate you until it knew you." The radio suddenly exploded with static. My supervisor's voice screamed, "Mason, get out!" Daniel grabbed my arm. "Don't listen." Another voice immediately came through. "Mason, it's Daniel. He's lying." I looked between them. 2 voices. Both sounded identical. Daniel pulled me toward the stairs. "We have seconds." We ran downward. The tower seemed much taller than before. The staircase kept going. 1 floor, 2 floors, 3, 4. I knew the tower only had 2 levels, but the stairs continued. The walls changed as we descended. Old photographs appeared along them. Missing hikers, dead rangers, search teams, hundreds of faces, and every photograph had one person in common. Me. Different ages, different years, same face, same eyes, same scar. Finally, we reached a basement that shouldn't have existed. In the center was a wooden chair. I stopped. Someone was sitting in it, a teenage boy. His back was facing me. I knew who it was before he turned around. It was me, 17 years old. He looked terrified. Tears covered his face. "Please," he whispered. "Don't let them take me again." Daniel stepped between us. "Mason, don't touch him." The younger version of me pointed toward Daniel. "He's the one who left me here." Daniel's face changed. "He's lying," the boy screamed. "He's not, Daniel." The lights went out. Something moved behind me. I heard dozens of voices whispering my name. Then a hand grabbed my shoulder. I turned and saw myself standing there. Not the teenager. Not the version from the window. Me. The version I had been chasing all night. He leaned close and whispered, "You finally remembered." I felt something cold press against the back of my neck. "Remember what?" I whispered. He smiled. "You weren't rescued in 2009. The tower shook violently. "You were released." Suddenly, everything went silent. When I opened my eyes, I was sitting inside my ranger truck at the bottom of the mountain. Sunrise was breaking through the trees. My radio was on the dashboard. Dispatch was calling my name. I grabbed it. "I'm here." The dispatcher sounded relieved. "Mason, where have you been?" I looked at the clock. 6:42 a.m. "At Lookout 12. Silence. Then the dispatcher said, "Mason, Lookout 12 burned down in 2009. I slowly looked toward the mountain. There was no tower, no road, no footprints, just trees. Then I noticed something on the passenger seat, the old Ranger logbook. I opened it with shaking hands. The final page contained one sentence written in fresh black ink. "Thank you for bringing me back." I heard a knock from inside the truck's trunk. 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, knock. Then another voice whispered through the rear speakers. It was my own voice. "Now drive home." I started the engine. As I pulled away, I looked into the rearview mirror. A teenage boy was sitting in the back seat. He was staring directly at me. His mouth was sewn shut. And underneath the dirt on his jacket was an old ranger badge dated 2009. My name was engraved across it. Story 4. The trail camera showed me standing in the woods 3 hours before I arrived. I know how impossible that sounds, but I still have the SD card locked in an evidence envelope at my station. The timestamp on the footage read 11:47 p.m. I didn't reach that section of the Appalachian Trail until 2:31 a.m. The camera itself was mounted to a tree nearly 9 miles from the nearest access road, inside a restricted area where hikers weren't supposed to go. I was sent there because a family had reported hearing someone screaming from the woods every night for almost a week. No missing person had been reported. No injured hiker had been found. Just screaming. The first ranger who investigated never made it past the old fire road. His truck was discovered with the driver's door open, engine running, and his flashlight lying in the middle of the road. He later returned to the station at sunrise without remembering where he'd been. He resigned 2 days later. My supervisor asked me to check the trail camera before we closed the area. I arrived at 2:31 a.m. The forest was completely silent. No insects, no wind, not even birds. I found the camera at 2:43. Its red indicator light was blinking. I removed the SD card and checked the footage on my handheld monitor. Most of the recordings were normal. Deer, foxes, bears. Then I reached 11:47 p.m. I saw myself. I was standing directly in front of the camera. Same uniform, same flashlight, same torn sleeve I was wearing that night. I was looking straight into the lens. I didn't move for nearly 3 minutes. Then the version of me on the screen leaned closer and whispered something. I turned up the volume. "Don't come looking for me." I stopped the video. My hands were shaking. I checked the timestamp again. 11:47 p.m. I checked my phone. 2:44 a.m. 3 hours had passed. I told myself the footage must have been recorded earlier. Maybe the camera clock was wrong. Then I noticed something in the background. Behind the version of me standing in front of the camera was a second figure. Tall, extremely thin. Its arms hung almost to its knees. It was standing between the trees, watching me. I zoomed in. The figure had my ranger hat on. I dropped the monitor. Something cracked in the forest behind me. I turned my flashlight toward the sound. Nothing. Then I heard a voice. "Mason!" It was my supervisor. He was supposed to be 20 miles away. "Mason, are you there?" I answered. "Yes." Static. Then he said, "Don't answer me again." I frowned. "Why?" His voice became urgent. "Because I'm not calling you." The radio went silent. A second later, it spoke again. "Mason?" This time it was my own voice. I backed away from the camera tree. The voice whispered, "Come closer." I refused. The trail camera suddenly clicked. I looked at it. The red light was flashing rapidly. It was taking photographs. One after another. I checked the monitor. The first image showed me standing beside the tree. The second showed me taking one step backward. The third showed something standing directly behind me. I spun around. Nothing. The fourth photograph showed the same thing, closer. The fifth showed it touching my shoulder. I felt nothing. I looked at the sixth image. The figure was no longer behind me. It was standing directly in front of the camera, looking into the lens. I slowly raised my flashlight toward the camera. Something was wrong with the trees. They looked distorted, almost as if the entire forest had been stretched around the trail. Then I heard footsteps. Bare feet, coming from the darkness. I radioed my supervisor. "I'm leaving." He answered immediately. "Good. Walk backward." I started retreating. "Don't turn around," he continued. "Whatever you hear, don't turn around." I walked backward through the trees. 10 steps, 20, 30. Then I heard a little girl's voice behind me. "Ranger." I froze. "Please help me." I knew that voice. It belonged to a girl who had disappeared in those mountains 17 years earlier. Her remains had never been found. "Ranger, I'm cold." My supervisor shouted through the radio. "Don't listen!" The girl's voice became louder. "I'm right behind you." I kept walking. Then something whispered beside my ear. "You're walking the wrong way." I nearly screamed. I turned my flashlight toward the trail. The camera tree was gone. The forest looked completely different. There was an old wooden cabin ahead of me. I had never seen it before. Smoke was coming from the chimney. A light was glowing behind the window. My radio crackled. My supervisor whispered, "Mason, whatever you do, don't go to that cabin." Then the front door opened by itself. A man stepped outside. He was wearing a ranger uniform from the 1980s. He looked at me. Then he pointed toward the trees behind me. "Run," he whispered. I didn't understand. "Why?" He looked terrified. "Because it's wearing your face now?" I turned around. The forest was empty. Then my trail camera clicked somewhere behind me. One final photograph was transmitted to my monitor automatically. It showed me standing beside the cabin. But I wasn't alone. Behind me stood the tall, thin figure. Its face was now visible. It had my face, and in the photograph, it was smiling. I didn't run toward the cabin, I ran the other way. The moment I turned, the forest seemed to close around me. Branches scratched across my jacket, roots caught my boots, and the fog became so thick that my flashlight barely illuminated the ground in front of me. Behind me, I could hear footsteps following at exactly the same pace. Every time I slowed down, they slowed down. Every time I stopped, they stopped. I finally ducked behind a fallen tree and killed my flashlight. The footsteps continued for another 10 seconds before stopping directly on the other side of the log. I held my breath. Something breathed heavily in the darkness. Then my radio clicked on. "Mason!" It was my own voice. I didn't answer. "Mason, I know you're there." I kept silent. "Turn your light on." I didn't move. The voice became softer. "You don't want to see me in the dark." I waited. After nearly a minute, the footsteps moved away. I counted to 30 and turned my flashlight on. Nothing. I checked my GPS. The screen showed that I was standing at the trailhead. That was impossible. I was at least several miles into the restricted forest. Then the GPS displayed a second location marker. It was moving toward me. I watched it approach on the screen. 100 yards. 50, 20, 10. Then it stopped directly on top of my location. My radio whispered, "Found you!" I dropped the GPS and ran again. This time I saw a familiar light through the trees. My ranger truck. I almost cried from relief. I reached it and pulled the driver's door open. The engine was already running. I got inside and locked the doors. The radio was still on. "Mason," my supervisor said, "listen carefully. We have your location." "I'm at the truck," I said. "Good. Do not start driving." I looked at the ignition. The keys were already inside. "Why?" "Because your truck has been parked at the station for 3 hours." My stomach dropped. "What?" "We can see it right now." I looked through the windshield. My truck was sitting exactly where I remembered parking it. The dashboard clock showed 3:17 a.m. I looked into the rearview mirror. Something was sitting in the back seat. I froze. It was a man wearing an old ranger uniform. His head was lowered. I couldn't see his face. I slowly reached for my flashlight. Before I could turn around, he whispered, "Don't." I stopped. "Who are you?" Silence. Then he said, "I'm the ranger who answered your first call." I remembered the voice on the radio. "Where's my supervisor?" He lifted his head. His face was covered in scars. "He never called you." I felt cold all over. "Then who did?" He pointed toward the windshield. I looked ahead. Someone was standing in the middle of the trail, wearing my uniform, holding my flashlight. My face was hidden by the darkness. The figure raised one hand. My radio immediately came alive. "Mason, step out of the truck." I looked at the old ranger in the back seat. "Don't," he whispered. The figure outside moved closer. "Mason, it's me." The voice was mine. I locked the doors again. The figure reached the truck. It placed one hand against the windshield. I could finally see its face. It was me. Exactly me. Same scar. Same eyes. Same expression. But the skin looked slightly too pale. It smiled and whispered through the glass. "You left me here." I shook my head. "I don't know you." The smile disappeared. "You will." Then every light on the truck turned off. The figure vanished. I heard the back door open. I spun around. The old ranger was gone. The radio screamed with static. Then a woman's voice came through. "Ranger, please help me." I recognized it as the little girl from earlier. "I'm trapped in the cabin." I looked toward the trees. The cabin was visible again. Its lights were on. I knew I shouldn't go. But then I heard another voice. My supervisor. "Mason, she's alive." I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out. The cabin door was open. Inside, I found dozens of old ranger uniforms hanging from the walls. Some were stained with blood. Some still had names attached. Every name belonged to someone who had disappeared in those mountains. At the very end of the room was a chair. A little girl was sitting in it. She looked about 8 years old. Her face was pale. "Are you Emily?" I asked. She shook her head. "I'm the first one." "First what?" She pointed behind me. "First ranger." I turned. The door was closed. The cabin was silent. The girl whispered, "It doesn't live in the forest." I looked at her. "Then where does it live?" She pointed toward the floor. Under the trail, the wooden boards beneath us began to shake. A low sound came from underneath. Not a growl. Not breathing. Something like dozens of people whispering at once. The girl grabbed my hand. "You need to leave before it remembers your real face." I looked down at her hand. Her fingers were freezing. Then I noticed something strange. Her wrist had an old ranger identification bracelet around it. The name printed on it was Mason Hale. I let go of her hand. She smiled. Too late. The floor suddenly collapsed. I fell into darkness. I landed on something soft. Human bodies. Dozens of them. Dead rangers were lying beneath the cabin, all wearing uniforms from different decades. My flashlight rolled across the floor and stopped beside a wall covered with photographs. I picked one up. It showed the trail camera from earlier. Another showed the cabin. Another showed me standing in the forest. The dates went back decades. Then I found the newest photograph. It was time-stamped 3:18 a.m. It showed me lying beneath the cabin. I was looking directly into the camera. But I wasn't alone. Something was standing behind me. I slowly turned my flashlight toward the darkness. Nothing. Then I heard breathing directly against my ear. I didn't turn around. A voice whispered, "You finally made it back." I closed my eyes. "Who are you?" The voice answered in my own voice. "The part of you that never left." I opened my eyes. My flashlight was lying several feet away. Beside it was the trail camera. Its red light was blinking. I crawled toward it and picked it up. The screen displayed live footage. I was looking at myself from the camera's perspective. I was lying on the floor, but on the screen, the person beside me was standing. It slowly leaned toward the camera. It had my face. Then the footage changed. The timestamp jumped forward 3 hours. It showed the ranger station. Morning had arrived. Other rangers were gathered around a desk. One of them was holding the trail camera. They were discussing my disappearance. I watched them search the woods. Then one ranger looked directly into the camera and said, "We found his truck." Another asked, "What about Mason?" The first ranger shook his head. "Nothing." I screamed at the screen, "I'm here!" Nobody reacted. Then the ranger holding the camera suddenly looked straight into the lens. His face changed. It became mine. He smiled and whispered, "Don't worry. I'll finish your shift." The screen went black. My radio clicked once. My supervisor's voice whispered, "Mason, if you're hearing this, don't come back to the station." I looked toward the tunnel behind me. A faint morning light was visible in the distance. I started crawling toward it. Then I heard footsteps behind me. 1 step, 2, 3. I turned my flashlight around. The tunnel was empty, but the footsteps continued. They were coming from inside the walls. I reached the opening and climbed out into the forest. Sunrise had finally arrived. Birds were singing. The fog was gone. Everything looked normal. My ranger truck was parked exactly where it should have been. I walked toward it. The driver's door was open. My radio was sitting on the seat. I picked it up. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Mason Hale. I'm safe." A dispatcher answered immediately. "Ranger Mason Hale." "Yes." There was a long silence. Then she said, "Sir, Mason Hale hasn't worked for this department since 2009. I looked down at my uniform. The badge on my chest was old, rusted, faded. I hadn't noticed it before. The name beneath it read, Mason Hale, and underneath my name was a date, 2009. My radio crackled one final time. A voice whispered, "Now you can go home." I looked toward the road. A ranger vehicle was approaching. As it passed me, I saw the driver. It was me. He smiled through the window. Then I looked at the passenger seat. Another me was sitting there. And in the back seat, the little girl was staring at me. She raised one finger to her lips. The vehicle disappeared down the mountain road. I stood alone beside my truck. Then the trail camera in my hand clicked. I looked at the screen. It showed the forest behind me. I was standing there alone. But in the newest photograph, taken 1 second earlier, something was standing directly behind my shoulder. It was wearing my uniform. And this time, it wasn't smiling. It was crying. Story 5. The missing hiker called 911 from a dead phone. The call lasted 11 seconds. "Please, tell the ranger not to follow the light." Then the line went dead. What made the call disturbing wasn't what the hiker said. It was the location attached to the call. The signal had come from a section of the Appalachian Mountains that had been closed to the public for 14 years. No cell service existed there. No roads reached it. And according to the park records, nobody had entered that valley since 3 rangers disappeared there in 2011. I was the ranger assigned to check it. My name is Mason Hale, and at the time I had been working mountain patrol for almost 9 years. I thought it would be another false alarm, a lost backpacker, someone who had crossed a restricted boundary and panicked. I was wrong. I reached the old trailhead shortly after midnight. The gate was chained shut, but the chain had been cut recently. Beyond it, the trail disappeared into thick pine forest. I radioed dispatch before going in. "Starting search," the dispatcher answered. "Copy. Keep your GPS active." I walked for nearly an hour before finding the first sign of the hiker. A blue jacket was hanging from a tree branch. It was wet, covered in mud, and frozen stiff. Inside the pocket was a driver's license belonging to a 26-year-old man named Aaron Bell. His backpack was 20 yards farther down the trail. His boots were inside it. Both of them. I stood there staring at the empty backpack. Someone had apparently walked into the wilderness barefoot. Then my flashlight caught something on the ground. Footprints. Bare human feet. They started beside the backpack and continued deeper into the forest. I followed them. The footprints were strange. Every left footprint was normal, but every right footprint had 6 toes. I stopped following them. My radio suddenly crackled. "Ranger Hale?" I answered. "Go ahead." It was dispatch. "We've received another call from Aaron Bell." My stomach tightened. "Where?" The dispatcher gave me coordinates. They were the same coordinates where I was standing. "That's impossible," I said. "He's calling right now." The radio went silent for several seconds. Then dispatch said, "We can hear you breathing." I looked at the radio. "What?" "We can hear someone else breathing beside you." I immediately turned around. Nobody was there. But I could hear it now. Slow breathing. Very close. I raised my flashlight. Nothing. The breathing stopped. I continued along the trail. About 20 minutes later, I saw a light between the trees. It looked like a flashlight moving slowly through the darkness. I called out, "Aaron!" The light stopped. Then it moved again. I followed it. Every time I got closer, it disappeared behind another tree. Eventually, I reached a small clearing. There was an old ranger cabin in the middle of it. I had never seen the cabin on any park map. Its windows were glowing. I radioed dispatch. "I found a structure," they answered immediately. "What structure?" I described it. There was a long silence. Then dispatch said, "Mason, there is no cabin in that valley." I stared at the building. "I'm looking directly at it." "Leave the area." I stepped toward the cabin anyway. The front door was slightly open. Inside, the walls were covered with old missing person photographs. Dozens of them. Hikers, hunters, rangers, children. Some photographs were decades old. Others were recent. I moved my flashlight across the wall. Then I saw Aaron Bell. His photograph was already there. Underneath it was a date, 2011. I stepped closer. Aaron was 26 years old in the photograph, exactly as he was now. I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. The cabin doorway was empty. Then someone whispered from the room upstairs, "Ranger!" It was Aaron. I ran toward the staircase. "Aaron, please hurry." I climbed the stairs. At the top was a narrow hallway with 3 doors. Aaron's voice came from the last one. "I'm in here." I opened it. The room was empty. There was only a chair facing a window. On the chair sat a handheld radio. It was still transmitting. I picked it up. Aaron whispered through the speaker, "Don't look outside." I froze. "Where are you?" "Outside." My blood went cold. I slowly approached the window. Aaron's voice screamed through the radio. "I said, don't look!" I looked anyway. In the clearing below stood a man wearing Aaron's blue jacket. He was barefoot. He was staring directly up at me. I couldn't see his face. Then he slowly raised one hand and pointed behind me. I turned around. A second man was standing inside the room. Aaron. His face was pale. His feet were covered in mud. He looked terrified. "Ranger," he whispered, "how long have you been here?" "About 2 hours." He shook his head. "That's not possible." "Why?" He looked toward the window. "Because I've been watching you walk around this cabin for 3 days." I stared at him. "I just got here." Aaron's eyes filled with tears. "No, you didn't." Then the man outside the window slowly lifted his face toward the glass. I finally saw it. He had Aaron's face. Aaron grabbed my arm. "Don't let him see yours." The thing outside smiled. Then every missing person photograph downstairs fell off the wall at exactly the same time. And from the forest came dozens of voices whispering one sentence together. "The Ranger has finally come back." Aaron pulled me away from the window so hard that I nearly fell. "Don't let it see your face," he whispered again. I wanted to ask what he meant, but something outside scratched slowly across the glass. 3 long scratches. Then silence. Aaron locked the door and pushed the chair beneath the handle. "What is that thing?" I asked. He stared at the floor. "It isn't a thing." "Then what is it?" He swallowed. "It's what happens to people who stay here too long." A knock came from downstairs. We both froze. Then another. "Ranger!" a voice called from below. It was my voice. "Open the door." Aaron shook his head violently. "Don't answer." The voice called again. "Mason, it's me." I looked at Aaron. "How does it know my name?" He whispered. "It knows everyone's name." Something began walking up the stairs. Slow footsteps. 1 step at a time. Aaron grabbed my radio and switched it off. "We need to get out through the window." I looked outside. The clearing was empty. The thing wearing Aaron's face had disappeared. We climbed through the window onto the roof. From there, we dropped onto the back side of the cabin and ran into the woods. I kept expecting something to chase us, but nothing followed. After several minutes, Aaron stopped beside a huge oak tree. "We can't keep running." "Why?" "Because the trail moves." I didn't understand until he pointed behind us. The cabin was gone. In its place was a steep rock face. I checked my GPS. The map showed the trailhead less than half a mile away. We started walking toward it. 10 minutes later, we reached a familiar clearing. My patrol truck was sitting there. I felt relief for the first time all night. Then Aaron grabbed my arm. "Don't go near it. That's my truck." "I know." He pointed at the driver's window. Someone was sitting inside. I raised my flashlight. It was me. The version of me inside the truck was staring straight ahead. My uniform was covered in mud. Blood ran down one side of his face. He slowly turned his head toward us. Aaron whispered, "That's the ranger I saw 3 days ago." The thing inside the truck smiled. Then the radio in my hand switched itself on. My supervisor's voice came through. "Mason, get away from the truck." I answered. "Where are you?" "I'm at the station." "How can you hear me?" "Because your radio is transmitting your location." Aaron looked at me. "Tell him about the cabin." I did. There was a long silence. Then my supervisor said, "Mason, that cabin burned down in 1987. Aaron's face went white. "That's not true." "I have the incident report in front of me," my supervisor continued. 4 rangers died in that fire." Aaron whispered, "There were 5. I looked at him. "What?" He shook his head. 5 rangers went inside. He pointed toward the truck. The 5th one never came out. The thing inside the truck began tapping on the window. Tap, tap, tap. Then it raised a finger and pointed toward Aaron. Aaron started backing away. "No." The thing mouthed something through the glass. I couldn't hear it. Then my radio translated the sound into words. "You left me." Aaron started crying. "I didn't leave you." "Who is it?" I asked. Aaron didn't answer. The truck door suddenly opened. The thing stepped out. It was wearing my uniform now. Not Aaron's jacket, mine. It looked exactly like me. It walked toward us slowly. I raised my weapon and ordered it to stop. It stopped. Then it smiled. "Mason," it said, "you finally found him." I looked at Aaron. "Found who?" Aaron's face changed. His terrified expression disappeared. He stood completely still. Then he smiled too. "Me." I stepped backward. Aaron's voice became deeper. "You were never sent here to find me." I pointed my weapon at him. "Then why am I here?" He looked toward the forest. "Because someone has to take our place." The trees behind him began filling with figures. Dozens of people stepped out of the darkness. Missing hikers, rangers, hunters, all staring at me, all wearing old clothes from different decades. Then I recognized one of them, my supervisor. He looked exactly as he had that morning. He raised his radio and spoke. "Mason, don't trust anyone in that valley." I looked down at my own radio. The same message was coming through. I looked back at him. He smiled sadly. "You shouldn't have followed the call." Then every figure disappeared at once. Aaron was gone too. I was alone beside my truck. The driver's door was open. I got inside and started the engine. The radio crackled. "Ranger Hale, do you copy?" I grabbed it. "Yes." We found the missing hiker. My heart stopped. Where? The dispatcher answered. He's at the trailhead. I looked through the windshield. A man was standing beside the gate. It was Aaron Bell. He was waving at me. What? I whispered. The dispatcher continued. He says he's been waiting for you for 3 days. I looked at Aaron. He smiled. Then he slowly lifted his hand and pointed behind me. I looked into the rearview mirror. Someone was sitting in the back seat. I couldn't see the face. I turned around. The seat was empty. When I looked back at the mirror, the figure was closer. Its face was inches from the glass. It was wearing my ranger hat. I slammed the truck into gear and drove away. I didn't stop until I reached the main station. Other rangers ran outside when they saw me. I jumped out and shouted that something was wrong in the restricted valley. My supervisor came running toward me. Mason, I grabbed him. You need to close that entire mountain. He stared at me strangely. Mason, you've been gone for 3 days. I looked at the station clock. 6:12 a.m. No, I left last night. He shook his head. No, you didn't. Then he handed me a missing person report. The photograph on the page was mine. My name was Mason Hale. Date missing. 3 days earlier. I stared at the photograph. It showed me standing beside the same trail camera. Behind me was the old cabin. My supervisor whispered. We found your truck yesterday. Where? Inside the restricted valley. And me? He looked toward the station entrance. We found you too. My stomach dropped. Where? He pointed behind me. I slowly turned. A ranger was standing in the doorway. He looked exactly like me. Same uniform, same face, same scar. He smiled at the other rangers and said, Don't worry, I'm the real Mason. Nobody moved. I looked down at my hands. They were covered in mud. 6 toes appeared on my right footprint. My radio crackled. Aaron's voice whispered, Now you understand. I looked toward the window. Outside, the forest was completely dark, even though the sun had already risen. Then I heard dozens of voices from somewhere beyond the station. One ranger came in. A pause. 2 came out. The lights went off. In the darkness, someone grabbed my shoulder. I heard my own voice whisper directly beside my ear. Which one do you think is you? Story 6. I found a man sitting inside an emergency shelter that had been buried under a landslide for 22 years. He was alive. He was warm. And he was wearing the same ranger uniform listed in an old missing person report from 2004. I was the first ranger to reach the shelter after a storm triggered a massive rock slide on the eastern side of the Appalachian range. The collapse destroyed part of the trail and exposed a concrete structure that hadn't appeared on any current park map. My supervisor told me it was probably an old emergency bunker from the early days of the park. We expected broken equipment, maybe animal remains. We didn't expect a person. The entrance was half covered in mud and stone. I squeezed through with my flashlight and immediately noticed something strange. The air inside was warm. Not stale. Warm. Like someone had been living there. A metal lantern was burning on a table. Beside it sat a cup of coffee. Steam was still rising from it. I called out, Ranger service. Is anyone inside? A man's voice answered from the darkness. Don't come any closer. I stopped. Are you injured? No. How long have you been trapped? Silence. Then he said, Since the storm. I asked which storm. He answered, The one in 2004. I thought I had misheard him. What year do you think it is? He didn't answer. I stepped forward and found him sitting on a wooden bench. He was wearing an old Green Ranger uniform. His beard was long, but his face looked strangely young. He looked at my badge. "What's your name?" I asked. He stared at me. "Daniel Price." I knew that name. Every ranger in our district knew it. Daniel Price had disappeared during a winter search operation in December 2004. His body had never been found. His case was still listed as unresolved. "Daniel," I whispered, "you disappeared 22 years ago." He smiled sadly. "I know." I radioed my supervisor immediately. "We have a survivor." Static. Then my supervisor answered. "Who?" I gave him the name. Silence followed. "Mason, get out of the shelter." "Why?" "Just get out." Daniel looked at my radio and smiled. "He told you that, didn't he?" "Told me what?" "That I'm not Daniel." I looked at him. "Are you?" He slowly stood. I was. Something moved behind the concrete wall. A soft scratching sound. Daniel looked toward it. "Don't worry," he whispered. "It's still sleeping." "What's sleeping?" I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he walked toward a second room. "You need to see something." I followed him despite every instinct telling me not to. The second room contained shelves covered with old ranger equipment. Radios, medical kits, maps, dozens of notebooks. I picked up one. The first page was dated December 2004. The last page was dated yesterday. I stared at the dates. "Who wrote these?" Daniel pointed toward the back wall. There were photographs pinned across it. Rangers, search teams, hikers, missing people. Some faces were familiar. Others were decades old. At the center was a photograph of me. I stepped backward. "That's impossible," Daniel said. "No, that's why you're here." My photograph was dated 2004. Underneath it was a handwritten sentence. "He will arrive after the landslide." I turned toward Daniel. "Who wrote that?" He whispered. "You did." My radio suddenly crackled. My supervisor's voice came through. "Mason, leave the shelter immediately." I answered. "Why?" "Because we've just checked the old records." His voice trembled. "There was never a shelter there." Daniel smiled. Then something knocked 3 times from inside the wall. Knock, knock, knock. Daniel's smile disappeared. "It's awake." I stepped toward the entrance. "We're leaving." Daniel grabbed my arm. His hand was ice cold. "You can leave." He pointed toward the tunnel behind us. "But it won't." I heard something moving inside the wall again. This time it sounded like fingernails scraping concrete. I pulled free and ran toward the exit. Daniel didn't follow. I reached the entrance and turned around. He was standing in the middle of the room, staring at me. "Mason," he whispered. "When you hear your own voice outside, don't open the door." I crawled through the opening and climbed onto the rocks. The storm had stopped. Dawn was beginning to break. I radioed my supervisor. "I'm outside." He answered immediately. "Good. Don't move." "Why?" "Because I'm standing 20 feet behind you." I froze. I slowly turned around. My supervisor wasn't there. Instead, Daniel was standing in the snow, still wearing his 2004 Ranger uniform. He raised one hand and pointed toward the shelter. "You left something inside." I looked back. The entrance was gone. There was only solid rock where the shelter had been. Then my radio whispered in my own voice, "Mason, you forgot to wake me." And from beneath the mountain came 3 slow knocks. The third knock came from directly beneath my boots. I jumped backward, and a crack opened through the frozen ground. I could hear something moving underneath the mountain, dragging itself through stone. My radio kept repeating my own voice. "You forgot to wake me." I ripped the battery out. The voice continued. I threw the radio into the snow. It still spoke. "Mason, I'm cold." I ran toward the access road. I didn't look back until I reached the ranger vehicle. Daniel was gone. The shelter was gone. Even the landslide was gone. The mountain looked completely untouched. I called the station using my phone. My supervisor answered immediately. "Where are you?" "At the eastern ridge." Silence. "Mason, we don't have an eastern ridge." I looked at the mountain. "Yes, you do," he said. "No, that section doesn't exist on our maps." Then he asked, "Did you find the shelter?" I didn't answer. He already knew. "Mason," he whispered, "we found something in the archives." "What?" "The 2004 search team didn't disappear." My stomach tightened. "Then what happened?" "They came back. All of them. All except one." "Daniel?" "No." I waited. "You." I laughed nervously. "That's impossible." "Listen to me. There was a ranger named Mason Hale on that team." I stared at the vehicle dashboard. "I'm Mason Hale." "The Mason Hale from 2004 was 19 years old." My blood ran cold. "That's not me." My supervisor said, "The report contains a photograph." He sent it to my phone. I opened it. 5 rangers stood outside the same mountain shelter. Daniel Price was there. 4 other men stood beside him. One of them was me. Same face. Same scar. Same uniform. But I was supposed to have been born years after that photograph was taken. Under the photograph was a handwritten note. "He doesn't remember yet." I looked toward the mountain. Something moved between the trees. I grabbed my rifle and stepped away from the truck. A figure emerged from the fog. Daniel. He looked exactly as he had inside the shelter. "You shouldn't have called them," he said. "Who?" "The station." "Why?" He pointed at my phone. "Because now it knows where you are." The screen suddenly lit up. A new message appeared. No sender. Just 4 words. "Look under your truck." I refused. Daniel whispered, "Don't." Something tapped the underside of the vehicle. Tap, tap, tap. Then a voice came from beneath it. "Mason?" It was a child's voice. "Please help me." Daniel grabbed my arm. "Don't answer." The voice continued. "I'm trapped down here." I asked Daniel, "Who is that?" His face became pale. "That's the first person we heard." "Who?" "You." I looked beneath the truck. At first, I saw nothing. Then 2 pale hands slowly wrapped around the axle. They were small, child-sized. A face appeared between the tires. It looked like a young version of me. The boy stared directly at me. "You left me here," he whispered. Daniel pulled me away. The boy's expression suddenly changed. His mouth stretched into a smile far too wide for his face. "You always leave me here." I fired into the ground beside the truck. The boy vanished. The mountain went silent. Daniel looked at me. "Now you remember?" I shook my head. "I don't." He stepped closer. "You were never born." I stared at him. "What?" "The ranger named Mason Hale was found inside that shelter in 2004. He was already there when we arrived." "That's impossible." "We thought you were a survivor." Daniel's eyes filled with fear. "Then we realized you didn't know what year it was." I remembered the photograph. The young me. The shelter. The words. "He will arrive after the landslide." "What happened after that?" I asked. Daniel whispered, "We tried to bury you." I stepped backward. "Why?" "Because you weren't alone." Something moved behind him. Daniel turned. A second version of him was standing among the trees. Then another. Then another. Dozens of Daniels stared at us, every one of them wearing the same old uniform. One raised a hand. "Run!" Daniel grabbed me and sprinted toward the road. We ran through the trees while the other figures followed silently. No footsteps. no branches breaking. They simply appeared closer every time I looked back. We reached the vehicle. Daniel pushed me inside. "Drive." I started the engine. "Where?" "Anywhere that isn't here." I drove down the mountain as fast as the road allowed. Daniel sat beside me, staring into the mirror. "They're still following us." I looked back. Nothing. "I don't see anyone." "That's because they're inside the vehicle." I slammed the brakes. Daniel turned toward me. His eyes were completely black. "Don't stop." I stared at him. "Daniel?" He smiled. "You finally said my name." His face began changing. His skin stretched. His jaw opened too far. I reached for the door, but something grabbed my wrist from underneath the seat. I screamed. Daniel whispered, "Don't worry, it's almost time." The road disappeared. The truck rolled into darkness. When I woke up, I was lying on the floor of the old shelter. The lantern was burning. Daniel was sitting across from me. Everything was exactly as it had been before. I checked my phone. No signal. No time. No date. I tried the door. It wouldn't open. Daniel looked at me. "You keep trying to leave." "Because I need to get out." "You already did." He pointed toward the wall. A new photograph was hanging there. It showed me standing outside the shelter. The date beneath it was today. But the photograph had been taken from inside the room. I stepped closer. Then I saw something behind myself in the picture. Daniel was standing there. And beside him was the young boy who looked like me. I turned around. The room was empty. Daniel was gone. The lantern flickered. My radio suddenly came alive, even though I had thrown it away hours earlier. My supervisor's voice whispered, "Mason, we've been searching for you for 22 years. I grabbed the radio. "I'm here," he answered. "No, you're not." I heard him take a shaky breath. "We're standing outside the shelter right now." I looked at the door. "Then open it." "We can't." "Why?" "Because the shelter isn't buried." I stared at the concrete walls. "Then where is it?" My supervisor whispered. "It's underneath the ranger station." The radio went silent. I heard footsteps outside the door. Several people, then knocking. 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. A voice called my name. "Mason, open the door." It was my supervisor. I reached for the handle. Before I touched it, Daniel's voice whispered from directly behind me. "Don't." I turned. Daniel was standing there again. He looked exhausted, terrified. He pointed at the door. "That's not your supervisor." The knocking started again. This time, hundreds of voices joined it. "Mason, Mason, Mason." I backed away. Daniel grabbed my shoulders. "Listen to me. There is only one way out." "How?" He pointed toward the floor. A trapdoor had appeared beneath the lantern. "Go down." I stared at the black opening. "What's down there?" Daniel looked at me. "The part of the mountain where they keep everyone who remembers." I lifted the trapdoor. Cold air rushed upward. Something breathed below. Then a child's voice whispered from the darkness. "Mason, I'm still waiting." I looked at Daniel. He nodded. "You have to go." I climbed down. The moment my feet touched the bottom and the trapdoor slammed shut above me, I was standing in a long underground tunnel. Hundreds of ranger badges were nailed to the walls. Every badge had a name. Every name belonged to someone who had disappeared in the Appalachian mountains. I walked deeper until my flashlight revealed the final badge. It was clean. New. It had my name engraved on it. Beneath my name was today's date. I touched it. The tunnel lights suddenly turned on. At the far end stood dozens of people. Rangers, hikers, search volunteers, all the missing. They were staring at me. Then every one of them slowly stepped aside. Someone was standing behind them, a man in a ranger uniform. He walked toward me. It was me, but this version was old, much older. His beard was grey. His eyes were exhausted. He stopped inches from me and whispered, "You finally made it back." I couldn't speak. He smiled sadly. "Now I can leave." Behind him, the tunnel door opened. He walked past me. As he disappeared into the darkness, my radio crackled one last time. My supervisor's voice whispered, "Mason, whatever comes out of that tunnel, don't let it reach the surface." I turned toward the door. Something was crawling through it. Something enormous. Something wearing the faces of every missing person I'd ever seen. And at the very front was my own face. It looked at me and whispered, "Thank you for opening the door." Story 7. The woman on the emergency radio had been dead for 19 years. I knew that because I had read her missing person file less than an hour before hearing her voice. It was 12:38 a.m. when the transmission came through my ranger radio. "Please, somebody answer me." I was parked beside an abandoned fire road deep in the Appalachian mountains, waiting for a storm to pass before continuing my night patrol. I grabbed the radio. "This is Ranger Hale. State your location." Static answered. Then the woman whispered, "I'm at mile marker 19. My stomach tightened. Mile marker 19 had been removed after a bridge collapsed there in 2007. There wasn't even a road anymore. I asked, "Who is this?" The answer came quietly. Rebecca Ward. I knew the name. Rebecca Ward had disappeared in October 2007 while hiking alone. Her backpack had been found beside the old fire road. Her body had never been recovered. I looked at the radio. "Rebecca, stay where you are. Search and rescue is on the way." She started crying. "No, don't send anyone." "Why?" "Because they already came." The transmission ended. I immediately contacted dispatch. "Did you hear that?" Static. Then dispatch answered. "Hear what?" I repeated the call. The dispatcher went silent. "Mason, we don't have anyone transmitting on that frequency." I checked my radio. The signal was still active. A faint breathing sound came through the speaker. Then Rebecca whispered, "He's listening." I looked into the darkness beyond my windshield. Nothing. I turned on the truck's floodlights. The forest appeared empty. Then something crossed between the trees. Too tall to be a deer, too fast to be a person. I started the engine and drove toward the old fire road. I knew I shouldn't have, but Rebecca's voice had sounded terrified. The road narrowed quickly. Branches scraped the roof. After about 20 minutes, I reached a rusted sign that read, "Fire road closed." Beneath it was an old mile marker. 19. I stopped the truck. The road beyond the sign was supposed to be destroyed. Instead, it continued into the forest. My GPS showed nothing. No road. No trail. No signal. I stepped outside with my flashlight. "Rebecca!" The radio answered immediately. "I'm here." Her voice sounded closer. "Where?" "Keep walking." I followed the road on foot. After about 5 minutes, I found a woman's shoe lying in the mud. Then another. Then a jacket. I recognized it from the missing person photograph. Rebecca's jacket. I picked it up. It was warm. Something moved behind me. I turned. Nothing. Then I heard a woman breathing. "Ranger." I aimed my flashlight toward the trees. A woman was standing 20 yards away. She looked exactly like Rebecca's photograph. Same face. Same clothing. Same long brown hair. But there was something wrong with her eyes. They were completely black. "Rebecca," I whispered. She smiled. "You came." I stepped backward. How long have you been out here? She tilted her head. Since the night I disappeared. That's 19 years. She smiled again. It doesn't feel that long. I raised my radio. I'm taking you back. Her expression immediately changed. No. You need medical attention. Ranger, listen to me. She took one step closer. The road only opens when someone calls. Who called? I asked. She looked behind me. You did. I felt my stomach drop. I never called anyone. She pointed toward my truck. Check your radio. I turned around. My truck was gone. In its place stood an old Ranger vehicle from the 2000s. Its headlights were on. Its engine was running. Rebecca whispered, "That's the truck they came in." Who? I asked. She looked toward the trees. The Rangers. Suddenly, headlights appeared farther down the road. Another vehicle was approaching. I recognized it immediately. It was my current Ranger truck. It stopped exactly where I had left it. The driver's door opened. I watched myself step out. Same uniform. Same flashlight. Same face. My double looked directly at me. Then he turned toward Rebecca and said, "Don't worry, I'm here to take you home." Rebecca began screaming. "That's not him!" I raised my weapon. My double slowly smiled. "Mason," he said, "you shouldn't have answered the radio." The radio in my hand crackled. My own voice whispered from the speaker, "Run." I turned toward Rebecca. She was already running into the trees. I followed her. Behind us, I heard my double shouting my name. Then I heard another voice. My supervisor. "Mason, stop running." I kept going. "Mason, you need to stop." I didn't. Then the voice changed. It became Rebecca's. "Please don't leave me." I stopped for half a second. Rebecca grabbed my wrist from the darkness. "Don't listen to them." We ran until we reached an old bridge crossing a deep ravine. Rebecca stopped. "We can't cross." I looked behind us. Something was approaching through the trees. Flashlight beams. Several of them. "Why not?" Rebecca pointed downward. Hanging beneath the bridge were dozens of bodies, all wearing Ranger uniforms. Some were old. Some looked recent. One of them was wearing my uniform. I looked closer. The body opened its eyes. It was me. It slowly raised one hand toward Rebecca. Rebecca whispered, "That's what happens when you answer the call." Behind us, the forest filled with voices, hundreds of them, all calling my name. Then my radio came alive. A calm voice said, "Ranger Hale, this is dispatch." I answered without thinking. "Go ahead." The line went silent. Rebecca looked at me in horror. "What did you just do?" I realized my mistake. The voice returned. "Thank you for confirming you're still alive." Something beneath the bridge began climbing upward, and from somewhere behind us, my own voice whispered, "Now we know where you are." The first hand appeared over the edge of the bridge. Then another. Then another. Dozens of pale fingers curled around the wooden boards as something beneath us began pulling itself upward. Rebecca grabbed my jacket. "Don't let them touch you." I raised my flashlight toward the ravine. The bodies hanging below were gone. The ropes were still swinging, but there was nothing attached to them. Then one of the ropes moved by itself and wrapped around the bridge railing. Rebecca screamed, "Run!" We sprinted across the bridge. Halfway over, I heard footsteps behind us. I looked back. My double was standing at the opposite end. He wasn't chasing us. He was simply watching. Then he lifted his radio and spoke. "Mason, you forgot something." I looked down. My Ranger badge was missing. I checked my chest. The empty space where it had been felt strangely cold. My double held the badge between two fingers. "Come get it." Rebecca pulled me forward. Don't. We reached the other side and ran into the forest. The road disappeared behind us. I checked my GPS. The screen showed we were heading toward the ranger station. That should have been impossible. We were miles from it. We're getting out, I said. Rebecca shook her head. No. We're getting closer. To what? She stopped walking. The place where they keep the calls. I didn't understand. Then we heard a phone ringing. Not a cell phone. An old landline. It was coming from somewhere ahead. We followed the sound until we reached a small wooden ranger cabin. The door was open. Inside was an old desk with a black telephone sitting on it. The phone rang again. Rebecca whispered, "Don't answer." I stared at it. Why? Because whoever answers becomes the next voice. The phone rang a third time. I stepped away. It stopped. Then the receiver slowly lifted itself from the cradle. A woman's voice came through. "Ranger Hale?" I didn't answer. "Ranger Hale, please, help me." Rebecca covered her ears. "Don't listen." The voice changed. It became my supervisor's. "Mason, we've located you." Then my mother's voice. Then a child's voice. Then Rebecca's. Finally, my own voice whispered, "I'm trapped in here." The cabin door slammed shut. I reached for it. Locked. The phone continued speaking. "You shouldn't have come." I looked at Rebecca. "How do we get out?" She pointed toward the floor. "There." A trapdoor was hidden beneath the desk. I opened it. A ladder descended into darkness. "We're going down?" I asked. "It's the only way." We climbed down. The tunnel beneath the cabin was lined with old telephone wires. Hundreds of them. They disappeared into the darkness in every direction. Some were humming. Some were carrying voices. We passed dozens of old Ranger radios sitting on shelves. Every radio was transmitting the same thing. My name. "Mason! Mason! Mason! Mason!" Rebecca suddenly stopped. "Listen." One radio was different. It was transmitting a recording of my voice. "If anyone finds this, don't trust Rebecca." I looked at her. She looked terrified. "I didn't make that." The recording continued. "She isn't human anymore." Rebecca stepped backward. "Mason, don't believe it." The radio said, "She died 19 years ago." I stared at Rebecca. "Is that true?" Tears appeared in her eyes. "Yes." "Then what are you?" She looked down. "I don't know anymore." Something moved at the end of the tunnel. Rebecca grabbed my hand. "We have to go." We ran. The voices became louder. The telephone wires shook along the walls. Then we reached a massive underground chamber. Hundreds of radios covered the walls. In the center stood a wooden desk. Sitting behind it was my double. He was holding my ranger badge. "You're late," I said. I raised my weapon. "Give me the badge." He smiled. "You don't need it anymore." Rebecca stepped forward. "Let him go." My double looked at her. "You were supposed to stay dead," Rebecca screamed. "I am dead." He nodded. "Exactly." Then he looked at me. "Do you know why the call reached you?" I shook my head. "Because you were already on the list." He placed a folder on the desk. I opened it. Inside were missing person reports. Hundreds of them. The first was dated 1956. The last was dated today. Every report had the same final line. "Answered the call." My name was at the bottom. Today's date. "What happens now?" I whispered. My double pointed toward a chair beside the desk. "You take the next shift." I backed away. "No." He smiled. "You already did." The lights went out. I heard Rebecca screaming. Then hundreds of radios began transmitting at once. Every missing person was calling for help. I fired my flashlight on. Rebecca was gone. My double was gone. The chamber was empty, except for the desk. On it sat my badge. I picked it up. The moment I touched it, the radio stopped. One telephone began ringing. I slowly reached for the receiver. A voice whispered, "Ranger Hale." I knew I shouldn't answer, but the voice sounded terrified. "Please, somebody answer me." I looked down at the badge. My name was no longer engraved on it. Someone else's name had appeared. Rebecca Ward. I put the receiver down. The phone rang again. Then again. Finally, a voice came through without me touching it. "Thank you." The tunnel walls began shaking. The chamber started filling with water. I ran toward the ladder. I climbed upward and burst through the cabin floor. Dawn was breaking outside. I stumbled into the clearing. My ranger truck was parked beside the road. Everything looked normal. I drove straight back to the station. When I arrived, my supervisor was waiting. "Where have you been?" he asked. I told him everything. He stared at me for a long time. "Mason, we never sent you to that area." "What?" He pointed toward my uniform. "You've been wearing that same uniform for 3 days." I looked down. The fabric was old, faded. Mud covered the sleeves. My badge was missing. My supervisor slowly pulled a photograph from his pocket. It showed a search team standing beside the old fire road. In the center was Rebecca Ward. Behind her stood a ranger. Me. But the photograph was dated October 2007. I looked at my supervisor. "That's impossible," he whispered. "That's what we've been trying to tell you." Then the station telephone rang. Everyone in the room froze. Nobody moved. The phone rang again. My supervisor looked at me. "Don't answer it." The third ring came. I heard Rebecca's voice through the receiver, even though nobody had picked it up. "Mason." I found the road. The lights flickered. My supervisor whispered, "What road?" Rebecca answered through the phone. "The one that leads back to you." Then the front door of the station slowly opened. Outside stood dozens of missing hikers and rangers, all staring inside. Rebecca was standing among them. She smiled at me. Behind her was my double. He held up my ranger badge. Then he pointed toward the telephone. The receiver lifted itself. A final voice whispered through the speaker. "Ranger Hale, your shift starts now." And every radio in the station turned on at once.